writing, what I'm doing is I'm just taking notes because I don't want to interrupt your flow.
Sure.
And we're live. Marama Davidson,
Morena.
welcome.
Thank you.
To the Department of Conversation, co-leader of the Green Party, Aotearoa Green Party of New Zealand.
Yes.
The official term?
The official term.
Just thought I'm checking that. So thanks for coming.
I'm really rapt to be here and have a chat. Chats are my favourite thing.
Yeah, well, that's what we try and do. We just have a bit of a chin wag. And
stunning. He's good. He's really good.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I didn't know until yesterday who your dad was.
We used to live down here.
Yeah, I read that as well for a bit, eh?
It was Dad's fault.
Really?
This was the Fortune Theatre.
Yeah. Just shut down last year, sadly.
Yeah. So this was one of Dad's original theatre places.
Yeah.
We came and moved down here, as well as this is where he filmed Play School.
Now we were talking about that. So for people who don't know, Rawiri Paratini is your dad.
Yes, sorry.
I actually worked with him I was lucky enough to work with him for a couple of days on Shortland Street.
Oh, no way.
And he was the most lovely.
He's lovely.
He was like coming in, oh look, here we go. Here's Dad.
Oh, that's Winsome, who's also a Dunedin.
I didn't realise. So that was the old whatever TVNZ big concrete building that was down here.
I've got vague memories, but it was this TV studios down here, and it was a proper paying job for once.
And he was the most lovely, most gracious.
He is.
You know,
Really
obviously there's directors and stuff, but he come alongside me a few times and was like, let's just try this and let's just try this. And just it was lovely. And that was like, gosh, what was that for me? Middle of last decade. So 15 years ago.
Oh, no, probably getting on to two decades.
Yeah.
There's probably, if you Google both of us together, there's probably some images of both of us together. We've done a couple of articles.
I was going to say as well, were you ever on Shortland Street? I'm not Shortland Street. Were you ever on Play School?
Oh, I wish. I used to think, I was so young, I used to think I had two dads. One in the lounge sitting next to me. I didn't understand how this could happen. There was one on TV and there was one next to me at the same time. That you know, the marvels of technology hadn't quite hit my brain yet.
Because you and I are exactly the same vintage.
Which is very young.
Yeah. I won't say what that is, but we're exactly the same vintage.
So youthful.
So that means he was, I think he was on Play School a little bit before.
Ooh, we're talking early 80s, late 70s.
Yeah, so it wasn't quite I was a bit beyond, without mentioning the years.
We're still not.
No.
We're dropping all these hints, but
I did actually notice that's not on your Wikipedia page. Is there a reason for that?
Well, I'm a grandmother, I hope you know.
Are you? You've got 6 kids.
I've got 6 children. I have got
mackerel.
a 11-week-old grandchild, our first one.
Wow.
So I now hold on proudly to my queer status.
Yeah.
I've been asking the Māori community if this means I can now get into the kaumātua tent at all of the events and have the tea and coffee and the cake served to me. Apparently there's a few other criteria.
Oh yeah. Like what?
I've been a little bit older.
Okay.
But you know, I'm gonna hold on to my queer status.
So Dad and you guys were down here in Dunedin for a while.
Yeah.
How long? Well, was that just while he was working on Play School?
My entire life, he has been in acting, TV, writing, producing. Yeah. And so Dunedin was a move from Wellington to come and do Fortune Theatre and to come and do Play School and write. We also, and this is relevant for political stuff, this is where we got involved, and my mother. So they're young Māori activists of the generation whose parents and grandparents had brought them to the cities from Māori homelands.
So that urbanised
exodus actually, and disconnected from their language and their land. So these young Māori, they started figuring out as teenagers, hey, something happened to us and we're not too pleased about it. Down here in Dunedin, my mum and my dad were involved with that sort of growing urban Māori discontent, and were involved in, that was then called Black Women's Group down here. And so I was a part of the activist and artists network down here. Ralph Hotere, Rowley Habib, Hone Tufare, Merata Mita, Jeff Murphy. I just thought they were my babysitters.
Yeah, some pretty big names there.
I just thought they were my babysitters, and didn't realise till I got older the incredible work that they were a part of.
And so your folks were a part of the attempt to make Māori language kind of to give it resurgence, to bring it back into mainstream New Zealand.
It's where my mum and dad met on the steps of Parliament in the early 70s as young, disconnected, frustrated Māori, urbanised Māori who were wanting to put their Māori tikanga back on the map, and they were fighting hard for it, and that's where they met.
Ironically, full circle, that's where their baby's back.
I said in my maiden speech, my parents met protesting on the steps of Parliament, and I'm now inside it, still protesting.
Yeah, because am I correct, you're not a minister?
That's right, I'm a non-executive member, and it's been really useful for this first term for the Greens being in a confidence and supply agreement, being in government for the first time ever in this way. Our members have needed a non-executive co-leader to help us over the hump of becoming comfortable with where we're at and the compromises that are inevitable in this position in power with a three-way, government. And so that's been really useful for me to be able to, as a non-executive MP, maintain that connection with our grassroots branch and also be able to have a bit more of an independent political voice. So
does that kind of mean you have the ability to call bullshit when you want to? Because if you're a minister, there's different expectations of towing the line, so to speak.
As a minister, I would not have been able to so easily have rocked up to Ihumatao last Friday. Yep. As a minister, I would not have so easily been able to accept the petition from the Hands Off Our Tamariki rally 2 days ago.
Yep.
And also being able to maintain an independent political position for the Greens, as you will already know, Pat, because you're onto it, is a crucial first term for smaller parties in government lose a massive percentage of support. Very ordinary thing to happen.
So your numbers are really interesting to look at. You guys got in at 99 on about 5.000001%. And then it seems that when National was in, so you kind of hovered around that 5, 6, 7% for a while. National got in, you broke double figures.
That's right, went up.
And then you're now in government back down to about 6.5%, something like that.
And when you said the word interesting, it's not that interesting in terms of movement. We've been 6, 6, 6, 6 this whole term, our poll numbers, and that's not even normal for us.
Yeah.
In the parliamentary term, we tend to go up and down all over the show, but we've just been hitting 6, 6, 6, 6. In one way, that's positive, and that's about the things we have been getting shit done, basically. But it's too close for me. It's too close for my liking.
Yeah.
We need to get further away from the 5% threshold than that.
The thing about being a minister, just taking a quick step backwards, because I meant to ask you this as you were saying it, the example you gave about how you could go to Imahuta,
Ihumatao and Oranga Tamariki issues,
Yeah, because there's the uplifting of children, that thing as well. So I'm clear of your example. Is that sort of why Claire Curran got into a bit of trouble over what she was doing with meetings? If she hadn't been a minister, like I remember people saying, if she was in opposition taking these meetings, it wouldn't be an issue. But because she's a minister, there are different expectations. If you were a minister, there'd be different expectations, but being outside of that area, you have a lot more freedom to do what you want, what you think is right.
There's still a way to be able to meet with people regardless of whether you're executive or not. It's about transparency.
Yeah.
And so that practice was a lesson for all of us, actually. Just be upfront about what you're doing, be very clear, and don't try to hide what you're up to is the first lesson, and that's for all of us.
What does that mean? Does that mean I'm being a bit of a pessimist here, does that mean not being a minister you can be less transparent?
No, it means all MPs being upfront about your agenda, what you're there for, who you're speaking with is important. People expect a lot more honesty, and we know around the world that honesty and transparency in governments is failing big time, and people want politicians to be upfront about who and why we are meeting with someone at any time.
Can you explain to us, to me, Ihumatao, the situation going on there, because there seems to be a falling out even amongst Māori with what's happening there, that one group wants this, one group wants that. There doesn't seem to be a unified voice. Now I'm reading articles why the government can't stop and shouldn't get involved. Can you synopsize it for us?
I can,
so everybody, because I do keep an eye on politics quite heavily. I have to be honest with you, the American system's caught my eye a bit more than the New Zealand system today. But even from someone who keeps their eye a bit on politics, I don't quite get it.
It's hard, yeah. So the first thing I'll say is it is difficult. It is complex, absolutely. The second most important thing for people to understand is the division has been created by the initial Crown injustice, which was the Crown theft of the land back in 1863. The official declaration happened in 1865. So that initial Crown theft of that land from all of the mana whenua that's the mess we're looking at today. What happened when the Crown took the land, and they took it because they concocted a phony rebellion and said if the Waikato Tainui people don't declare loyalty to British sovereignty, then this is what we're going to do. And it was against the kingitanga at the time. So that land was taken by the Crown, beautiful parcel of land, and it was later pretty much given to private ownership, to private non-Māori farmers, and they farmed it for 100 plus years, and then sold it for millions and millions and millions of dollars to Fletchers when the national government put through the speedy housing areas legislation.
So this is in the southern part of Mangere, is that right?
Right next to the airport, actually, right next to the airport. We have got 800 years, the earliest site of human settlement, as well as the earliest site of European arrival settlement.
So that would mean to me, as a layman, even apart from the sacredness for Māori there, that actually it's a historically
archaeological,
important site. Of course.
Stone fields erected, all those hundreds of years ago, archaeological, historical, culturally significant. Oh, you're so good. Culturally significant site for all peoples.
So this is looking back over the Manukau, is that right?
That's right, that's the Manukau Harbour. Now have a look at that maunga. There's a maunga there. Now Ihumātao has given so much to the people of Auckland and indeed the whole country. So that maunga has been desecrated for motorways, for quarrying. The harbour has had sewage dumped into it for decades and decades. The local rivers and creeks have had pollution and spill poured into them that ruined their eel, their species, their native plant habitats for decades and decades. This piece of land and these people have given so much for the rest of us. This is some of the most fertile volcanic soils and has also been feeding the country with the vegetables and produce that it grows as well. So the people who are occupying the land, and they are also mana whenua, they also have whakapapa interests to this land, as well as kawarau-āmaki who are saying we want to support the build here. Now the thing is, when it comes to land disputes, we go to Bastion Point. There was not united agreement there.
Amongst Māori, you mean?
There was not. There were elderly who were saying to the young Joe Hawke then, pack up this protest and let's go home.
Right.
Pākai Tore, Whanganui, same thing. Raglan Golf Course, same thing. So this divide and rule tactic that has been caused by the initial injustice from the Crown is not new, but it is also healthy dissent among Māori communities where young people are constantly challenging the older generation of leadership. And I also want to say it's not just young people who are occupying the land. I was talking with kaumātua aunties, nannies and uncles who are there as well. So there's some misconceptions that are being put out into the wider discussion across the country. One of the big ones is that there is no kaumātua backing. That's not true. Another one is that the occupiers do not have whakapapa to the land. That's not true. The other one is that this land is being gifted back to iwi. Actually, they have to buy the houses. They still have to buy the houses. It's just a right of first purchase.
Right.
It's not that great a deal. I would love any iwi to actually be able to determine what's happening over the land that is not driven by a property development company, but that is actually driven by their own. So that's why the Greens are very clear. We want the government to listen to all the voices who are involved, not just one iwi or hapu. We want the government to understand that if there isn't a peaceful resolution and some leadership shown, we will see another bastion point of police dragging people off the land, because those occupiers and protectors, they ain't going anywhere.
So what's the solution? Let's be silly here and wave our magic wand. Wave our magic Kim Jong-un.
Yeah.
If you could write up the solution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, being able to take the land, buy the land back.
So Māori purchase the land, or Māori be given the Crown purchase the land?
It could be local government, could be central government, could be partnership with philanthropist organisations. There are innovative solutions to acquiring the land back, and then being able to have a tikanga-led process for iwi to be able to come to a peaceful agreement over what happens with it.
So land is purchased back.
That's one option that's on the table. My big thing is it's up to mana whenua to decide what happens as a peaceful resolution. And this is why James and I wrote a letter to the Prime Minister in March. We simply can't, as government, ignore. That's not a solution at all. And I'm glad to see that because of the determination and commitment of the people, that government has had to change tack and sit up and get involved. The protectors are not going anywhere. And what's even more exciting for me is they're building more and more community. They're setting up tā moko tents, health and safety tents, study tents for students, the Filipino, Taiwanese, Pacific peoples, Muslim community, all sorts of different groups, unions, can see the injustice and the excitement. For me, I've been saying what's happening there really is the best of us.
I used to work as a talkback host on ZB.
I'm aware. I'm aware.
So, with the greatest of respect to ZB, the job, I loved it. It was a great amount of fun. There was often a lot of pushback with things like treaty settlements.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And, spending Crown money, et cetera, et cetera. But I was always of the opinion, and I used to try and retell someone's story.
Yeah. So
I would say to people, where are you from? Where is your ancestry? And they'd say, Ireland or England, or typically somewhere Caucasian is typically the answer.
Yeah.
I say, so if you found out today that, let's say you're from Ireland, you're from Northern Ireland, which is where my ancestry is, that the English government had taken 1,000 acres of land off your family 100 years ago, that land was now worth, several million pounds.
Well, they sort of did, didn't they?
But then I'd say to them, what would you be fighting to have some of that back today? And the ones who were full of crap would say, nope. And you'd go, you liar. You bloody liar. That's not true at all. And I think when we repackage it, to me it seems to be, I don't want to say simple, but if something was stolen that can be returned, it should be returned. Isn't that actually isn't that what we tell our kids?
Yeah, right.
You've taken that off that other kid at your school, give it back to them.
Now, Pat, we're gonna get a little deep here, because what we're up against is a discomfort when people's understandings and realities are challenged, and that's what we're coming up against. The fact that we don't have te reo and our colonial history in schools, and we grow up, some of us, all our lives with a misconception, and if we have based our lives on values and then those get confronted back to us and we find out we were living a lie, that's not comfortable for people. Fair enough that there would be some, no, I'll be fine, because what they're actually responding to is the fact that their entire foundation of belief is crumbling. When people's foundations crumble, it's really difficult for them to come to a place of compassion and understanding, and what humans tend to do instead is deny. So that's the exciting conversation that I'm starting to see a resurgence of. How the big challenge is, how do we get people to understand, actually, this is positive? this awakening and awareness is positive. You're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. This is going to be a way for true peace for us with this wider understanding. But it's hard. That's hard for people.
Yeah. I mean, as I said, not wanting to oversimplify it, but I think that, I was raised by a good Irish Catholic family.
That's my whakapapa as well.
I got put into me various things from a very young age about doing the right thing, about being honest and, not stealing and saying please and thank you and those sorts of things. And I don't see at its most simple, if you expand that to a $10 million plot of land, how that should be any different. I mean, just because there's extra zeros, I don't see why the principle should be any different.
And also that... let's look further ahead. What will that actually mean? So in the case of Ōkahu Ngāti Whātua, Bastion Point, what did they do? They turned around and gave it all back. They protected parks and public spaces. They invite every year community events, hāngi, matariki, celebrations. So let's think beyond this initial discomfort of, now they'll want all their land back. And let's actually think, well, what does it actually mean? It's going to mean good things, because the guardianship principle of owning land and belonging to land is also a thing to benefit the challenges that we are now facing, and how we should be thinking, how do we want to in Aotearoa, how do we want to live together? And there is if we could get over this discomfort of, oh no, my identity is going to be threatened by affording people theirs, that should not be a trade-off.
I think this is part of the problem. While we're doing this, Jace, look up Jason Momoa on Instagram, Pride of Gypsies. We'll come back to
Trying
that.
to get him over to Humato, by the way.
Okay, when you do, can you hook him up with me? Because I want him in that seat.
You're the first one up.
Yes. So it's Pride of Gypsies on Instagram. I think what you've said to me, which really resonates, is kind of their story, our story, kind of there. So this is what I am really. This is how I'm. You can tell by my beard how much Irish I've got.
I love the Irish story.
The ginger
and the shared dispossession stories.
Yeah, well, my family is Northern Ireland, Belfast. My Catholic roots. So like my ancestry are in
Catholics.
There. But what I was going to say is, and I used to do this when I was doing talkback, I'd often say I'm not Māori, but I because I'm of this land, because I'm a Kiwi, I'm a New Zealander, I'm born and bred, this is my home.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Māori story is part of my story.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I can't, even though the ancestry might not be in the soil for me here, because I'm a part of this country and a part of this land, and this is my homeland, that story is a part of my story.
Absolutely.
And I think that kind of way of looking at it means it's not an us and them.
Yes.
It's
us together.
Yeah, because not through ancestry, but through my homeland, through this is my land as well. Yeah. It's my story. So the Māori story is my story.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a way of bringing people together in a way that you go, we're all in this together. It's not an us and them. It's almost like different factions. It's cousins, different factions of a whānau.
What we say is tūranga waiwai, or a place to belong, is for all of us here.
Yep.
Not just our Pākehā cousins who have been here for several generations, but also new people, newcomers coming to our lands from bringing their own stories of dispossession and disconnection as well. And everyone here under Te Tiriti needs to be able to feel affirmed in their right to belong. That's tūranga waiwai, your right to stand, your right for your feet to stand in a place and belong. And you will belong, people will belong to this place differently, and all of them are valid. So, for example, I have mana whenua in Hokianga where I have some leadership responsibilities and rights that might be different to my cousin from the other iwi over the river. Yeah. And so belonging rights and responsibilities look different, but we all belong. And Te Tiriti is a great base for that justice and peace for all of us to think about our connections to this place, sharing sharing the job of keeping our place clean and healthy, looking after our people and our rivers and our bush and our animals, is for all of us to have a responsibility and shared responsibility together. And I think that's peaceful. Yeah,
I agree. Reason I wanted to bring Jason Momoa up is they in Hawaii, they seem to be going through similar things.
Yeah,
they are up for an Indigenous fight at the moment as well. Do you keep an eye on this? Do you guys, the Indigenous groups around the world?
So we've got Uluru, or what was it called? Ayers Rock in Australia. Mauna Kea. And so I was involved 4 years ago with this kaupapa with protection of Mauna Kea. What's happening is Indigenous people around the world, and Jason Momoa has thrown his weight behind it, which is incredible. Indigenous people are standing up and saying, no more. We are protecting our sacred spaces. I'm really good to also see there's been a pushback that this is about science versus traditional Indigenous peoples. No, it's not, because we have Indigenous scientists. It undermines the fact that there is a way for progressing and enlightening ourselves without further desecrating and trampling over Indigenous rights. And also there's been a letter, I think it was up to over 800 astronomers when I last looked, probably more now, signed by astronomers, some who directly would benefit from this big telescope, who have said, this is not the way to do science. This goes against science. If you separate scientific research and study and work from collective social license, then you are anti-science. And they've signed this letter and they've said, we oppose building this 30 meters deep, that's deep, man, telescope on the top of this mountain. There is a way for us to support Indigenous science and Indigenous scientists, and that would be a far better way for us to do our work.
The Indigenous science it's interesting because I don't know if it's the same thing, but I just watched the latest episode of Gordon Ramsay's show where he came to New Zealand.
I didn't see that one.
And he's looking at I can't remember what it's called, Jace. Look up Gordon Ramsay's
Did he have a honey?
latest show. He did. Yeah, they came here. What he's doing is he's going around the world trying Indigenous food, native food that's not known.
Yeah.
And he had a big session, and they did Māori food. And he was on Stewart Island, and he climbed up trees, and they gathered paua, and and there's a big thing at the moment. There's a bit of a kickback where they are upset because he shot a goat. I don't know why, but just why don't we just give it 10 seconds just to see if any of it comes up. We'll probably get an advert first, will we? If we do, here we go.
And I'm coming to National Geographic. Join me
Best
on a
in New
delicious
Zealand,
global adventure. Incredible. As a chef, I thought I knew flavour. Delicious. I thought I tried it all. I also fancied myself in pretty good shape. Oh my lord! Before this show,
Best New Zealand. That's power.
What I do for food.
Wow.
It's a big world out there. And it's not.
That's New Zealand too.
Gordon Ramsay Uncharted.
Wow.
Uncharted. So you'll find it online if people want to have a look at it.
Super cool.
But I was thinking about the science part of it, food technology, food sciences, and what Māori know and what Māori can teach the rest of the world, the rest of New Zealand about the way to eat naturally. It was a really good episode.
Awesome.
I was shooting a job several years back for Tourism New Zealand, and we went round, and I can't remember exactly where we were, somewhere on the North Island. I know that's really vague. But the guide we had was, and I cannot remember anything, but it was there was this huge tree and there's this bush that grew around. And he said, if you've got a toothache or if you've got a little bit of pain, just grab this leaf.
You had Ricky Bennett up in the
grab this leaf, chew on it,
That's
and
Ricky.
it'll take away the tooth pain. And so you can also it cures this ailment and this ailment, and all you do is. And he said the way to choose the right leaf is look for the one that's been eaten by bugs
because they're
that means
popular.
That's the best one.
Awesome.
And it's stuff that it's just a leaf on a tree.
You were probably it was Ricky Bennett or Rewi Spraggan, and they were probably showing you kawakawa leaves, and so Indigenous knowledge worked over centuries of scientific observation is going to play a key part in helping us to protect our ecosystems, our species and habitats. I'll give you an example. Kōri dieback, Waitakere at the moment. So we've got scientists from traditional science communities, younger generation, who are now understanding that their research the quality of their research is better when they are collaborating with Indigenous knowledge. So she was able to distill her sample sizes down from hundreds and hundreds down to 60, this is an example, because of collaborating and working with Indigenous knowledge and having better results. Now, if we think about ecosystems, when has one species of plant or animal ever been able to survive on its own back? None do. They're all dependent on each other. It's an ecosystem, and we should think of knowledge in the same form. Knowledge and collaboration, adding value to each other's understandings, building on each other's shared understandings, filling gaps can only be a good thing, right? That's how nature works. We're only just coming around to Indigenous knowledge as being able to pull us through some of the biggest challenges of our time: inequality, climate change. Another example, I'm going to visit a passive house today.
Cool.
So cool, right?
Yeah.
We are realising that, communal type of community living and arrangement is where we're going to need to go.
Yep.
That's how Indigenous peoples, actually that's how humans lived.
Totally.
If we think about your Irish tupuna,
Yep.
we didn't have this single dwelling, single family buzz going on.
No, grandma and granddad were there. They'd
Generations.
work. Yeah, absolutely.
Gardening, sharing gardening spaces together, sharing collective foods together. And so we are starting to realise, oops, we're done wrong somewhere along the way, and we're pulling that stuff back from our humanity actually. And Indigenous peoples just happen to have stayed a little bit more connected to some of those principles.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have a small association with some people who are Spanish, and what you see in the Spanish community is more of what you see in the Māori community when it comes to groups of people that are elderly still living with, that sort of thing. That seems to be a real English, colonial, two up, two down.
But only recent for English people too, I reckon. If we go back further...
What do you think it is then? What's happened between, say, 1850 in London?
Capitalism.
You reckon?
If we go back to look at...
we're going to talk about Bernie Sanders soon, so it's a good time to get into it.
If we go back to look at people, generations supporting each other, and our elderly generation who may not be as physically mobile as our younger ones. So a simple example is who's out in the gardens, who's looking after the babies. Yeah. The older ones who are transferring generational knowledge to the mokopuna, looking after the babies, and that all important transference and connection with grandparents, while other age groups are doing the other work that they can do at that time. That's an ecosystem of generational knowledge and communal function living. Now that got disrupted when the world only recently decided actually what we want is for people to work for the profit of the few at the expense of the many, and to terrorise the land and water at any cost to be able to do those short-term profits. That has interrupted the way we live and work as well.
That's interesting, because the irony about that is it seems that the previous model is a more sound model financially and stuff anyway.
Hello. It's this thing of individual families feeling that we need to compete, actually. Competing against individuals for resources. It sets us up against each other. It divides us. It makes us blame people who are also struggling. Yeah. Also struggling makes us think, oh, you're taking my houses and my jobs, when really the people at the benefiting right at the top for the few are the ones that we are not paying attention to, because we're fighting each other for the scraps.
So I like the idea of community. I have 2 or 3 boarders in my house.
Nice.
Intentional community. Yeah. You have resources. I live in a 5-bedroom house, and I have my kids half the time, and I realised that when my kids went back to their mum, I was sitting in this house literally by myself. Yeah. And I just thought, this is ridiculous. There's resources here that I can share. Obviously, that helps. It's a win-win. Yeah, I get bored. Yeah. But then I also have a girl who comes and uses my gardens to grow flowers because it was too much for me. And I think the idea of sharing resources when you can. Like I said to her, look, I've got, a fucked up back, I've got arthritis and this kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
I can't do much to help you in the area of work, but I can provide you space.
Can you work my land?
Yeah, and she does it as a commercial
That's
thing.
awesome.
She goes and sells
That's
the flowers,
awesome.
and then I have to do no weeding.
That's amazing.
So I was like, woohoo, no weeding.
That's amazing.
That's all I care about.
We're seeing co-op sort of approaches. So in Auckland, I've got friends who chipped in on getting together some chickens.
Yep.
A few households. She had the land, no one else did.
Yep.
But they were able to pool the resources. They all share in the eggs. But one particular property was able to host the actual chickens.
Excellent.
Those sorts of co-op approaches have been proven time and time again.
Yeah.
I am time poor. I have no time. I would rather pay people to fix my mending, do all of that stuff, and I look locally. Locally around who's in my neighbourhood who can do this stuff. I don't have time, but I'd like to be able to share my financial wealth to those in my own community who can do the stuff that I can't do. It's really, we're getting back to that.
What are you showing us, Jace?
Yeah.
Yeah, this I just reminded me that I saw a while back, and I think this is the one example I could find really quickly. But there's kind of this trend in some places. I think I saw one in the Netherlands as well, where students, so university students, are living in retirement villages, and so it's helping the old people feeling
cool.
young. They get to, the students are learning from the old people. They're getting that knowledge, generational knowledge passed down. The young people are helping the old people feel young because they've got this youth around them. They don't feel like they're just gone somewhere to die.
So like university students and retirees.
And from what I understand too, I think the university students get to live there for free.
Yeah.
In return for helping the old people with doing things and just kind of being helpful.
I saw this last year. It's fabulous, and it again recreates the intergenerational exchange and knowledge, which now we're going to go somewhere, which does not get picked up on a narrow GDP measurement of how we are doing. So those exchanges, gardening knowledge, exchanging generational knowledge, looking after people and old people and babies, those contributions don't get picked up in a narrow GDP focused narrative of the economy, which is what we've been held hostage to.
So what do they get picked up on?
Nowhere. So that's the problem. That's what we're trying to change right now, is our indicators of well-being need to change. And we took the first step this year with the well-being budget. It's good to see us moving away from this. So when you asked me before what happened to the communal living, narrow indicators of success is what happened. So we stopped valuing.
We still have to society still has to then accept those values. Like we have to then go, oh, okay, so 2.4 kids and a dog and a white picket fence and me living by myself with 2 guys, I still have to accept that. Yeah. So it's not just the narrowing of the indicators, it's society then accepting those narrowings as well, which means we do have some control over it. Yeah,
totally. And that's what we have done. We've gone and accepted a narrowing. Now we're realising that there's a better way, and that discounting other valuable community contributions has actually undermined entire groups in our community. It has lent itself to this narrative of lazy, poor people who don't add anything to our community. That's been a real unfortunate hangover from this move, and this neoliberal capitalist focus has been a hangover. It's been a hangover to groups. So we don't value people with a disability just being able to survive on a social security income. We've got caught up in this whole thing as well. Oh, hand up, not hand out, shouldn't be on it for long. Hey, some people are valuable and need the support to survive and be able to live and put down roots in their community simply for who they are. And people from the, for example, disability community get really upset when there's this the whole focus of get off the benefit. Actually, they are valuable, being supported to survive. Yeah.
So it's almost like re-establishing our focus on what is value, on what has value, on what's valuable in society.
Another thing I think about, before All Blacks were professional, for example, so they had to work. They also had to hold down a job. When they needed to take leave from the job, they were hailed as heroes. They have to support them. They've got to take leave. They were hailed as heroes, whereas a woman, a mum taking time off after she's had a baby, what a nuisance. So there are different values behind what we consider are worthy and not, and we've got to change that.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That's like for me at the moment, my wife is a stay-at-home mum looking after our two girls. One's in school now, one's 2.5, and it's a conscious decision for us to keep her at home. It makes it much harder financially, but tough. There is no financial dollar value we can put on the stability, the emotional well-being that these kids are going to have, having just a solid family. Their mum always around. That being able to go out and do things rather than just being bunged into daycare. And for some people they just don't have that, and that sucks, because we were just lucky enough that we lived in an area where it was a little bit cheaper, and we were able to just to make ends meet.
We haven't properly valued that.
And and some, I'm not judging people that go back to work, because absolutely it's about choice, and it's about choice. And so have people being able to choose whether they do it? Because I've got a good friend in Wellington who did choose to go back. They didn't need to. They were certainly financially probably in a position where they didn't need to, but she wanted to go back to work because that was who she was, and that's great. But putting value on things that aren't financially tangible, and we just capitalism doesn't allow for that.
But the example as well of the friend wanting to go back to work, if we were still in our community vibe, grandma might be at home to look after the kid, and then actually it's not a like the decision is not tearing someone apart. It's like I've got some like you've said. Right. You said about being financially, being able to contribute financially. If person X wants to go back to work because their skill set is earning money, as opposed to pulling weeds, or even childcare, even if it's a mum, then use your skill set, go back and earn money. Have someone else in your community.
Totally.
Yeah. So
if we had that, if we went back to that model, so I keep trying to get my mum to move in with us. I'd like to have 4 generations in one household.
Wow.
Actually, because of that very reason. Sure, a mum of young children going back to work needn't be such a difficult and disruptive thing to do, especially when we can still keep children connected, thriving, happy and healthy, and they are. I mean, you're talking to someone who went back to work 6 weeks after my babies were born.
Wow.
And that was both a financial and independence decision, sure. I'm very pleased and grateful for the early childhood education and care that they received, absolutely. But far out, imagine if actually the aunties and the nannies were just there. They were just able to not work. See, my mother has to work. Actually, imagine if the nannies and aunties we were able to value their contribution to our society. And if we were to look fiscally at this, which I'm loath to do, but hey, let's pretend. If we were to look at the down the river benefits for that, that's going to go into health, education, justice system, but especially health, housing. All of the things are going to pick up that fiscal value, but more importantly, an enduring health and well-being value for the generations. And so this is why we're seeing that move back to that model.
But even, I was just thinking, even that model can be tutued with a little bit, because I was just thinking, what if Nanny came back to live in with the family and Mum actually wanted to stay home with the kids, so Nanny, who might only be 50 or 55 or whatever, went out and worked because she still had a career, and so she actually brought money in. Exactly. I mean, we're talking about this model where the young person goes back to work and the grandma looks after the kid. I mean, there'd be nothing wrong with the grandma going and working and bringing financial, and Mum staying home with the kid. Whatever works.
I like the tutu thing. I think I'm going to run and steal that completely from you, the tutu aspect, because we can now... The principle, though, remains the same, It's about collective, shared contribution and understanding. It doesn't matter who does what, but we're doing it together. That's the principle.
I just had the thought, someone from Australia or the US or something picking up on this podcast, should we explain to them what tutu is or make them do some work?
Oh, what does it even mean? I always struggle.
I always with play with.
Play around with, I've always struggled.
Just like tweak or adjust, fiddle with. Tutu until it gets right.
Having a tutu, I have a tutu with these things.
Having a play around, innovate. pick things up and have a play around with them and see what more we can do.
Green Party of Aotearoa, New Zealand, tutuing with the future.
Yes.
Something like that. There
Tutu.
you go. Hey, have you been keeping an eye on the US stuff at the moment?
Hey.
Did you keep up with any of the debate last night? Second one's probably
not last night. Just while we look for that, can I just say, speaking of US politics, I have he's way younger, but my younger brother is hardcore gamer, I'm talking, got his room set up like a blimmin' spaceship.
Yep.
So because he's been doing it for so long, he is more on top of US politics because of me, because of the gaming community and who he's got links to in the US and in particular, but around the world.
Wow.
I have these massive political discussions with him, young fella who otherwise would not be at all interested in politics. But the minute you get him talking, he suddenly knows more than I do about what's going on in the world. He's seen it from a very different perspective, very grassroots gaming community perspective, and having an international analysis on what's happening and how people are feeling. And it's been so valuable to me to see a different perspective on what's going on. But US politics,
I had the same. I had almost the exact same thing myself because I game a bit myself, and I met this guy. His name's Lincoln, and he's a big Mexican Samoan dude who lives in like South LA.
Wow.
And so I was having chats with him as we were playing about gun control and stuff because he's
he's playing Call of Duty.
Basically, and because he was telling me, I support the right to bear arms. I think that we should have. I was like, he was like, I have a handgun, and then he told me a story about like 2 weeks ago how one of his neighbours had a home invasion or somebody was doing something to him, and he went over with his gun and was able to intervene. And so I was like, okay, cool, that's because that's something outside of my echo chamber that I get on social media. And that was through the gaming community and chatting with him.
Totally.
That's weird.
It's true, it's true who you can be put in touch with.
The debate last night was I started watching it, and then
who was in this one?
The big two were Bernie and Elizabeth Warren, and it seems that they dominated everything. There was a great moment where Bernie, one of the guys was trying to challenge Bernie by saying, "You don't about the healthcare. You don't know it's going to happen that way. You don't know."
And he
Bernie
wrote the bill.
I wrote the damn bill.
I wrote the damn bill. I was there.
And Elizabeth Warren's one of her big things, and this is something I want to talk to you about politics about. She basically said it, and I'm paraphrasing. Why would anyone try and run? Because she was talking about all the Democrats who are kind of moderate.
Yeah.
And who are basically saying...
Establishment.
Yeah. And she goes, I don't know why anyone would run for president to try and not achieve big things. Because it seems that what's coming out... And I think that you look at, for example, in America, the right blocking Obama's pick for the Supreme Court, the right giving trillions of dollars worth of tax breaks. The right in America seems to be able to achieve big things, and the left doesn't. Yeah. And so the left is saying we want free healthcare for all, and then half of the left is going, oh, better not do that, can't do that. People, but the right just goes, we're going to do this.
Yeah, and they do.
We're going to do this. And
good point, Pat.
Does that fly over here? Like I didn't read too much. I saw Simon Bridges say the other day something about 200 million towards
cancer.
Yeah,
40 million a year.
That's a pretty big idea. Is it something that we see? I think the left and the right in America are a bit different. I think the left in America is probably more centrist, and I like in our scale, and I think the right is more far right.
And have a look at what on the surface, what Simon is proposing on the surface is not for a conservative right wing ideology. He's framing it as in we care about healthcare. So that's actually digging into inclusive and progressive values, right?
Well, that was a thing where I would talk to my American friends and contacts when we had John Key as Prime Minister, and how I would say he supports this, and this. Like same-sex marriage, totally. Interest-free student loans, like these things that are saying, and he's our right-wing Prime Minister, and these right-wing American guys, their heads would go boom, because in their eyes, they're all far left. So I don't think we've got the same makeup with our left versus right, but I'm still wondering if in the New Zealand cycle,
there are echoes.
Is there a belief, is there a an understanding that the right can get big things achieved, and the left, I think the left the world over, tends to be more fractured than the right. The right tends to be more, I'm on message, this is consensus.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with that.
So does that mean because there is the potential of it being more fractured? I mean, you could even just say fractured as in the Greens and Labour are separated. That's not necessarily a bad fracture, but they're not the same party.
Yeah, sure.
So is it harder to get big things done if you're on the left?
Yeah. So it's not that. So I want to acknowledge that around the world for 40, 50 years, conservative narrative has dominated. Conservative narratives and framing of values have dominated, and progressive has not done good enough. We have not done well. We've got to get better at that. And we're starting to, with the likes of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Squad, Sanders, Corbyn, Progressives Australia, Greens, Marine Faruqi, who I met only weeks ago. So progressive leadership is starting to get its crap together. Our messaging has not been clear, strong and uncompromised like conservative messaging has been. And we've got to do better at that and be strong and bold in our... You're so right. I agree that when the right go out, they don't care. They just go do it. Most bizarre things.
But even if they don't do it, they promise big things. Now, as I'm talking, I'm also thinking I'm going to contradict my own idea there, because when Auntie Helen was in, that was when things like interest-free student loan, and they're big ideas, and then they're so big that National had to then support them, because if they said, and what was it, working for families, interest-free student loans, they were the big Helen Clark things. If National had to come in saying we're going to get rid of those, they wouldn't, that would have been terrible. So maybe because they were so big, they had to be adopted by the right because they're big ideas.
Goes to show that when you put up something truly progressive that people can automatically connect heart and mind to, it's going to get some traction. We need to make it impossible for people to oppose. We need to make it impossible, and we need to stand clear in our boots on the front line of those values and those policies and solutions. Absolutely. And we've got to get better at that.
So what's the big things that the left in New Zealand need to do? I mean, we've got an election coming up next year. Some of it's interesting that some of your lovely colleagues in politics are avoiding us this year, aren't they, Jace? But I'm sure next year when we make the invite out there, they'll be here in a heartbeat.
Oh, I love you guys. How would anyone want to avoid you?
So when they're coming through next year for the election year, what are the big things that the left has to do, has to promise, and then has to get through?
Move away from housing as a commodity, approach housing as homes for people to goddamn.
How do we do that?
We haven't been able to interrupt the market, which has been failing. We've got to get bold.
CGT?
Progressive tax. Can
I give you the answer for the CGT?
You want to give me... Go. Do it.
So the problem with what's happening with the CGT, the capital gains tax at the moment, and the issue why it fell over is people were saying, hang on, for a long time in New Zealand, our retirement schemes have been crap. So I've put money into housing to protect me for retirement, and now you're telling me I'm going to lose a bunch of that. So here's what we do, right? When KiwiSaver came in, there is a line of demarcation that you kind of go, houses bought before KiwiSaver came in are exempt. Don't care if you own 1, 2, 5, 10 or 20, because they're exempt because it was a different system. Since KiwiSaver came in, our politicians, our government has said we are now going to figure out a way to give you a proper retirement. Houses purchased after that, the second house, are not exempt of CGT. Game over, done.
Yeah. So the family home was never going to...
No, I agree. But the second home after, because what's happening is there's all these 70-year-olds now who are going, hang on, this is my retirement. We didn't
sell it enough. We didn't talk about it properly.
But if you use that KiwiSaver as a line of demarcation, then you're protecting the 70-year-olds who have done what they've done in the housing market to provide for their retirement. But you're saying to people like me, if this is the way you're going to do it, when you're 70, there's going to be a tax on it, because we do provide you another way of doing it through KiwiSaver.
Yeah, and because we want to stop the large-scale investors and speculators, not what is termed as mum and dad ownership. Sure. That's not what we're after here. We're after the 30, 100, 500 homeowners, 500 homes owned by, one investment property or one person. That's what we want to interrupt.
Does that exist?
Oh, sadly.
Really?
Sadly.
That is crazy.
That's wrong. It's morally and fiscally wrong. It's not sustainable.
Well,
that's why we're locked out.
Here's another thing, though. There are parts of the world where home ownership is not considered necessarily like we go back to Spain, for example. Yeah, Europe. There are people Denmark. Who just, there's expectation that we're just going to rent our whole life. And it's not like a can't afford, it's just the way that those people live.
Thank you.
So how does that fit into your home ownership model?
So home ownership cannot be the only model. There also needs to be massive upscale build of public and community housing. And I'm glad you brought it up. Renters' rights. So renting can no longer be a second-class citizen option. It's got to be a valid option. You talked about people being worried about their retirement. What if you didn't have to worry that when you got to the age, you didn't need a whole house to keep you enduring and thriving?
Yeah.
What if we could all just understand that we were going to be looked after and live good lives and didn't fret about whether we owned a home or not to do it? Renting needs to be secure and affordable and healthy, for goodness sake. That's the least we can expect. At the moment, the rental market, it's running wild. It's Wild West out there. It's terrible. People cannot afford it. Unions are telling me that some of their members are paying, this is ridiculous, are paying up to 85% of their income on rents. And that's not a mansion. And that's not necessarily a healthy home either. 65% of your income on rent is massively a struggle, and too many people are there. But actually, we want it. I want to get things down to 50%, if I'm honest about it. So that's going to require some sort of transparency around rent increases. I'm avoiding the word rent control. Some sort of transparency around rent increases and some security of tenure, so that if you can feel like you can actually put some roots down and literally grow some gardens and do some weeding and have your kids go to the same school for more than a year, that's going to be good again for all of us. But some massive levers have to change.
How does that work? And I'm sorry to come back to a capitalistic kind of idea about supply versus demand. I mean, how does that work when there's 5 people looking at a house and you've got a landlord who wants to pay their mortgage and stuff going?
It's 50 people. It's 50 people looking at a house.
I guess I'm thinking about Dunedin, but maybe it's 20 in Dunedin. But because there's a lot of concern about rental market here as well. Yeah. So I'm thinking about the actual logistics
Supply
of it.
is a thing. Supply is a thing. So...
but that can only surely be controlled by the government. I mean, but what about Kiwi Build? I've heard that hasn't done anything that we've been promised about. So it seems that the solution that's been put out there at the moment still is not the solution.
I agree. You won't find me disagreeing with that at all. And watch this space for some green vision. Watch
So were you going to come back next year and release that?
Probably sooner. Watch this space. No. What we need, we need the strong public, state and community housing. That includes iwi-led housing as well. We need renters' rights. We need government rent-to-own progressive home ownership scheme. And we need a fairer progressive tax system as well. And those are some of the levers. And considering that we've got the lowest Reserve Bank's interest rate for borrowing at the moment, holy heck, we could do some things. And
I saw Bernard Hickey yesterday on...
What's he on again?
One of the networks coming out saying that his gut tells him, his expertise tells him that OCR might go down again, and towards the end of next year, mortgages might be even cheaper.
It's looking like that. I've been hearing the mumblings of that. So the government levers and the government ability to borrow for key infrastructure right now, that's what we absolutely should be tapping into, and understanding that that's a long-term fiscal saving actually. Having people in good, healthy homes that are affordable, oh my goodness, really? Is that far off? I don't reckon.
I like that you're not a minister, because you can probably answer this question for me.
We'll see.
Donald Trump, is he racist?
Yes.
100%?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. He's not an inclusive person who brings people together. He divides people, and what he is saying is absolutely 100% racist.
The particular attack on the squad to go home when 3 of them are from America and 1 of them is naturalised. But what we thought was interesting was just today, I think, or yesterday, in the last 24 hours, Quinnipiac's come out with a poll, and I think it's the first time that more than half of the 1,300 people polled say Donald Trump is racist.
Wow.
So
I wouldn't have believed that poll came out with that. That's interesting.
51%, 45% do not. Obviously, when you go and separate into the parties, it's even higher.
But that's a movement away. That's interesting.
So it's interesting that I did look at the the breakdown of who was actually polled, and it looks to be third of Independents, Democrats.
Right.
Not quite that, because there's a few others as well.
Right.
So it seems pretty legit. And Quinnipiac is a pretty legit source.
Standard enough poll.
Yeah.
A good indicator of some movement. Look, we can do better with our leaders. I mean, we can aim for leaders who can unite people, who can resist the contesting narratives and pit people against each other. We can do far better than that. I'm inspired by the squad. I'm inspired by what the values that they're putting up. I'm inspired by their political savvy. I'm inspired by a new generation of leadership. I hope to get to meet them one day. I can't wait. And we can do better than divisive, dog whistling leadership. And I think I'm loving seeing a demand for a better type of leadership.
Who's your pick out of the Dems at the moment? Who's your pick to go up against Trump?
Okay, I'm going to say Warren.
Really?
I love Bernie, and I love his political savvy and his messaging, and how I love his grassroots movement building focus. That's been incredible. But I'm also loving. Oh, and none of them for me 100%. No one's perfect. But I'm also loving Elizabeth's strength on solutions and the clarity with which she's been able to get into some pretty complex issues and come out clearly on what is happening and what needs to happen.
When we had David Clark in, we as the Minister of Health, we asked him, I said to him, can you please explain to our American friends why we are able to have, like when I go to the chemist, I don't pay any more than $5 for a prescription. I saw Bernie's trip to Canada the other day. In Canada, they pay $36 for a vial of insulin. In America, they pay $340. In New Zealand, you don't pay any more than $5 at the chemist for everything. Can you explain, from your perspective, to our American friends, why are we able to have the healthcare system? My mum passed away last year, motor neuron disease. She had a bed from Germany flown in for her and given to her. She had an electric wheelchair, given to her. Obviously, that were all returned once she passed, but she didn't pay literally for a thing, and got world-class top service, everything all the way through. And my parents have health insurance, but they still got all that for nothing. Yeah. So can you explain to our American friends why we're able to provide healthcare to all our people, and where many over there think you can't?
In short, because we consider it a core public service, and we consider it a public service that is also going to help us keep communities strong and spend money wisely for all of our other services. Also, I mean, I was thinking about my son, who is now 11, 2.5 years ago, picked up some weird virus that actually had all of the South Pacific and Australia experts and doctors. It was like an episode of House, scratching their heads because they couldn't figure out what the massive drop in his eosinophil blood count was, a drop that they had barely seen before. And he was put through heart, organs, brain, blood, numerous expert tests over months and months and months and months. We are a privileged income household, obviously. We went through the public health system, and that all of that was done on the investment in our public health system. It's fantastic that we have been able to approach health as a core public service, a collective service, in the interests of all of us being stronger.
I also think that maybe the Dems, Bernie and Elizabeth Warren, have it wrong at the moment, because they are talking about getting rid of all private healthcare insurance. Right. Whereas what I want to know from them now, maybe you can hook me up with the squad, is actually we have a very good, albeit there's not perfect, but a very good public health service, but also people can have private insurance if they want to. Yeah. I've got private health insurance. But if I fell down the stairs as I was leaving here and broke my ankle, I'd go to the public hospital. Yep. So I think one of the things they seem to be missing, it's an all or nothing. And I want to know why the system that we've got, or perhaps Canada's got, or UK's got with the NHS, that seems to be a logical system where there is a free option that everyone has access to, or for those who have means to it, if you want to go and get private to cover a few things like, I think I'm specialists and operations or something, they can do that as well.
I think it's a different, what we're seeing there is their all or nothing approach is a slight different context. So if America had been on a good trajectory of good public health care, then maybe they'd be in a position to not have to uphold the choice of some private health care. Because we have such a strong public health system, some of the time and for most people, most of the time and for most people, we can legitimately entertain private healthcare insurance because it's not at the cost of a public healthcare system. So I think that's the main difference. I do want to put a caveat in there and say that there are some inequities that still are coming through, but for different groups. So, for example, cancer is a big deal. Simon is right in that respect. Cancer. The sad thing. Let me just go to the side for 2 seconds. The sad thing is that they absolutely pulled back health funding while they were in 9 years of their government, and they wound down the Cancer Advisory Group 4 years ago. So let me just put that there. However, he's right. At the moment, you have crowdfunding and give a little pages for some cancer sufferers to get their medication, and for people who can afford it, there's a straight inequity there. So there's still some things to mop up. There's still some equity things to mop up. But in the large, we can have private insurance because it doesn't undermine our public health system.
I was, how are you going for time? You got 5-10 minutes yet?
Yeah, go
on.
All
right, cool.
Go on.
I was watching Bill Maher in America.
Oh, what's he up to?
It was a wee while ago, and he was talking about he wanted the country to go into recession, to basically be a negative against Trump. And of course, one of the commentaries that came out from that was, well, that's ridiculous because all the people will be hurt, etc., etc. Yeah. And the point someone made, which I think is really interesting, and it's something I'm going to ask all the politicians in New Zealand I speak to about, was whether you hate Trump or love Trump, you should want him to be the most successful president for the benefit of the people, because you don't want the economy to be hurt or harmed. You don't want people to lose houses. You actually want it to be a successful economy, a successful country.
Yeah.
And what it made me think was, that's interesting, because here in New Zealand or other countries with a system like ours, where we have an opposition party, opposition parties, what are we doing to allow people like Simon Bridges to help make New Zealand better? Do we have a system where we encourage and welcome on board, in a political sense, ACT, and national, to be involved in decision making, to make it better for all of us, or are they just the opposition and they get to throw mud and actually don't have an input? And if they don't have an input, how can we make it so they do for the betterment of the bigger picture?
No, for sure. And so MMP is supposed to pick up the first big chunk of working together, and that's why we have got a range of voices in Parliament. There are already examples of cross-parliamentary work happening. The drug space is, we are trying to get a harm-based approach and get national MPs onto a cross-parliamentary team. Climate change, actually, James Shaw has been negotiating across every single political party to try and get something onto the table. So there are numerous, Jan Logie, my goodness, Jan Logie leading a whole of government, for the first time ever, whole of government approach to ending domestic violence and child abuse, and working across all parties again to try and put something on the table. So there are numerous examples of that. I think in the main, our current political system in New Zealand is probably less adversarial than most, actually. But the Greens have always maintained it could be even more constructive.
There always seems to be a conversation around the Greens. Can you work with National? And I think I heard I don't know if it was you, but someone saying the other day is if they changed everything about themselves,
Q&A.
we might be able to.
It's true.
But the last election, I think the answer was anyone can work with anyone. It depends on sort of the
Pretty
circumstance.
much.
In fact, the one thing I remember Don Brash once saying, the only group he couldn't work with was Labour. And part of me kind of thought, oh, that's a bit sad because as a citizen, I want my politicians to do the best for me, and to say I can't work with them on anything. I think it's sort of. I'm not unrealistic and say peace, love, and moonbeams.
I get it. Yeah, totally. So in the 2000, in the leading up to the 2014 and up to the 2017, so the last two terms of Parliament, the Greens actually achieved things with National when they were in government.
Yep.
So even in opposition, we were able to work to achieve the clean-up of toxic sites, the establishment of cycleways around the country, and home insulation. Yeah. That was a Green MOU initiative with the National Party. So again, there are ways of working together, and we've proved that we've been able to do that. But even more so for New Zealanders, we've proved that, yes, you can actually, oh goodness, we supported David Seymour's amendment to the end-of-life choice bill last night. So there absolutely are times when we work together, and I think New Zealanders do want to see more of that.
Correct me if I'm wrong, one of the amendments that needs to come in for the Greens to support it is for the person to be closer to death.
Terminal illness with 6 months.
We had a guest in who was an end-of-life specialist, a doctor from the University of Otago, and one of her big concerns, she wasn't an anti-euthanasia person, but one of her big concerns was if at that stage the person had autonomy, they could make the decision 100% by themselves. Is that something that's being changed, has been changed, is going to be changed, or is that still in there?
You mean the terminal illness to 6 months?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's going to be changes before it becomes law.
Yeah.
Do you know if the patient, the person who wants to euthanize, do they still have full control?
Yes.
The concern from Janine was that
safe and supported.
That there was no consultation. So in other words, don't have to include whānau, no one else to be. Is that still a part of the bill at the moment?
The final decision, my understanding, is it still does come back to the person
so they could
facing
do it with
the end
no consultation.
No, that there are safeguards, absolutely.
I mean consultation with family, not consultation with doctors and stuff.
It includes doctors, and the final decision does come back to the person, but what we wanted also was no coercion. Yeah. And that was one of the protections that we wanted to make sure was in there, was no coercion. And support, safe and supported, is what the amendments that went through last night, which included narrowing the scope down to terminal illness with 6 months left to live, but also raising awareness and educating GPs and health practitioners, and no advertising. That was one of the other sort of amendments that got put through.
That'd be terrible. So you could imagine an advert coming up for, hey, want to end your life? Yeah. Try XYZ pill.
Oh, this stuff is
Ask
emotional.
your doctor if euthanasia is right for you.
This stuff has involved lots of emotions and people who deeply care along the whole spectrum. It's been tough.
Well, I have to say that with Mum passing last year, I thought I'd come away from that experience having a very clear idea, and I didn't. And in fact, one of the things that I know from conversations with family members, that my mum mentioned that if she could do something in the weeks leading up to it, she would have. But then again, the actual last 24 hours was some of the most magical, special, precious times.
I understand.
So it's a really weird one. Hey, look, we don't want to hold you up too much longer. I have two other questions for you. When is medicinal cannabis going to be legal?
We are strongly working through that, and the referendum and what a law change would look like. And we are hopeful, and we can see from the polls and the surveys that we will be able to get something through. And that's very politician-y vague, I'm sorry.
If there is still, and I have read some polls that say majority of New Zealanders say they don't want it. If the referendum was to come back with the public saying no, does that actually matter? Because I think that, in my opinion, it's a given. It's a medicinal cannabis should be legal. It should be legal now. And actually, to be honest with you, I don't give a crap what the public think. I think it should be legal. So what happens if it comes back and the public says no?
Really confident about where we're heading, especially with the being able to work up some legislation so people are aware of what they'd be voting for. I'm feeling really confident about that. Let's see what happens. I'm not even going to put any, but I hear, for me, this is again an equity issue as well. So who was I talking to? This morning I talked to Otako Runanga, and they were talking to me about, for example, you might have a wealthy gathering party where the cops will approach the dope smokers there and just say, oh, put it away, mate. You might have a whole different other poor community, Māori boys in particular, and immediately apprehended and taken through. So for me, there's an equity issue.
And receive different punishments.
Totally.
The same Pākehā kid goes through the same charges, Māori kid goes through the same charges, Māori kid gets a more severe.
So we know that's not even hearsay, that's just the truth. That's actually what is happening. And for me, there's an equity issue there that we need to correct. Medicinal cannabis for me is an absolute let's just do that.
Yeah, totally.
So that's been good. That discussion is good. But yeah, I agree. I would like to see us stop using a punitive measure on cannabis, and even a harm approach is going to help help us have better outcomes as well.
Finally, have you managed to re-own the word cunt yet? Has that happened?
It hasn't.
What was that all about to start with?
It was about speaking out against the online abuse in particular that women in public face, and pushing back on the sexist abuse in particular, and the sort of defiling of women with those sorts of abuses that were hurled at me. Other than that, I'm actually regretful about the distraction of it, and there was never a campaign. It was just me speaking to the racist and misogynist abuse that women get, and it got picked up.
Was it a bit like the gay community has taken back the word faggot, or the black community has taken back the word, and America's putting nigger and that kind of stuff? Was it a bit like that? It's like, if you're going to use this as a derogatory term,
totally,
then stuff you, I'm going to own it.
And originally it wasn't a derogatory term. It was...
Well, in Australia it's still not. You can be a good cunt. Oh, he's a good cunt.
It was about pushing back on abuse that is aimed particularly at devaluing and defiling women for who we are, and that's still happening, and I will continue to be a strong voice against that. But I also understand that I'm under a different set of judgments and a different level of judgment, and that I have to be 1,000 times better than every other politician to seem valid at all.
Right. Hey, that's like an hour and 25 minutes just flown by like that.
It really did. Wow, good chat.
Yeah. Is there anything you want to leave us with? Tell people about? Let them know about anything coming up? What are you in Dunedin for? As
you indicated, we're in Dunedin for our Green Party AGM this weekend out at the university venue there, Saturday and Sunday. So we're going to be talking with members about all the things that we've got shit done. We got shit done. We got massive boost to Department of Conservation into offshore new oil and drilling permits, massive transport infrastructure spending, Jan Logie, ending domestic violence, phasing out single plastic bags, and many more things, showing our members, reminding and celebrating the shit we got done, but also we are going to be that progressive holding space, and we are going to be the people in the party who say we've got to do more and faster, and that's the work that we have to do as well.
It's almost a bit like, and I don't mean to put you guys in the same party, but it almost seems like the Labour Party is the like the Joe Bidens of the world. They're the left, but they're the kind of the left that's always been, and that the Greens are the squad. That's kind of
I like that.
Do you know what I mean?
I think that's a massive compliment.
I'm not saying that with any disrespect
I think it's a compliment
to Labour.
Yeah.
But they're more like the left who've been around to
They've got a job to do in their political space. We've got a job to do in our political space. We are very clear, for example, that the Welfare Expert Advisory Group, who Phil O'Reilly, business roundtable executive, comes up and says we've got to pay benefits more money. Come on, this is a blueprint for what we should be doing, and the Greens will champion the fact that the priority to raise disgustingly low benefit levels are what we are going to stand up for.
Is there anything public happening in Dunedin while you're here? Or
Yeah, totally. So Saturday, of course, our big, massive work, climate change and the zero carbon bill. James will be addressing the conference publicly and with media on climate change and climate work. Look out for that. That's pretty awesome. On Sunday, I'll be addressing the public on inequality, and I won't give you any more clues except to say I've talked about some of it today.
Ooh. So little tease today?
Little tease.
Little tease. And hopefully we'll see you again before the election next year.
It's been cool hanging out.
I was going to say thanks very much. Don't you think, Jace, for the jacket matching the colours exactly?
It's great.
I would like to coordinate these things.
and just for clarification, you're talking about increasing funding for the Department of Conservation, not the Department of Conversation, which is us.
We'll put in a bid. We'll see what we can do.
Yeah, we're looking for some funding at the moment. Just slip some our way.
You'll deserve it. You'll deserve it.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Pat. Thanks, Jace.
Thank you.